Hey everybody, how's it going today? It's your boy Cyclical coming at you with another Naruto discussion video, and today I am finally going to take the opportunity to talk about someone who I feel I have criminally ignored up to this point. Everybody's favorite masked ninja. I'm going to be talking about Kakashi Hatake today. Now, more specifically, I'm going to be talking about the idea that Kakashi is the strongest Jonin in the Hidden Leaf Village. Now, when I say this claim, it's actually something that has been taking root in the Naruto discussion community lately, and I think I finally managed to track down where it comes from. There's a scan in one of the earlier data books that claims that Kakashi is indeed the top Jonin in the entire Hidden Leaf Village, but as some of you may know, I don't exactly hold the data books as credible sources, and so I'm going to go over whether or not this is actually a true statement or not. So, of course, the first thing I'm going to need to do when I break down a question like this is to define what exactly would make someone the top Jonin in the entirety of the Hidden Leaf Village. And I think there are a couple of criteria for this. Of course, battle strength is going to be necessary since a ninja's primary job is engaging in combat with other ninja. Especially once you reach the higher ranks like Jonin and possibly Anbu, you're basically required to be participating in ninja battles of some sort or another. Whether that be to defend your village or to go and assassinate enemy ninja, combat is a necessity. The second thing that needs to be considered when finding who is the top Jonin in the entirety of the Hidden Leaf Village is their ability to complete missions. Now, this is going to boil down to a lot of other things besides just being able to fight. Things like, does the character in question have the intelligence to go about their mission in an efficient and effective manner without causing too many negative repercussions? I'll remind everybody that Kakashi's father himself, one of the most legendary ninja in the Hidden Leaf Village's entire history, eventually was forced to take his own life due to repercussions from a mission that he didn't execute in a very efficient manner. This also entails abilities, things like the ability to infiltrate unseen, to remain stealthy, and to track targets over long distances, etc., more than just combat abilities. Other criteria to become the Leaf Village's top Jonin would include things like a willingness to serve the village above all else, putting yourself on the line for the sake of the village, and just being generally a well-rounded and useful tool for the good of the village overall. And now with all of those criteria out of the way, I can begin to examine why Kakashi would be considered the best Jonin in the Hidden Leaf Village. The first aspect of Kakashi's character that I want to go over is actually his experience doing missions for the Hidden Leaf Village. As we all know, Kakashi is an extremely skilled ninja, and he has undertaken many high-rank missions ranging all the way up to S-rank missions that he has handled on his own. In fact, a quick search turns up that Kakashi has completed 1,141 missions for the Hidden Leaf Village, many of which are all in the high rank category, which makes him one of the most prolific, hardworking ninja of the entire franchise. Of course, completing missions isn't the only virtue that Kakashi has going for him when it comes to experiencing things for the village. Over the course of his prolific career, he's also experienced great hardships and loss, all for the sake of the village. His best friends, Obito and Rin, are a great example of this, one of which died on a mission completing it with Kakashi, the other of which Kakashi had to kill with his own hands just to make sure that the village remained safe. And you might think that these hard things that Kakashi had to experience may have hardened his heart against the village, but it's only after this that Kakashi later went on to become a team lead for both an entire Anbu squad, and then later tutor the Team 7 that we see in the main series. I know this isn't exactly the most major factor in determining somebody's overall usefulness to the Hidden Leaf Village, but Kakashi's attitude is also actually something of great merit to him. See, Kakashi is incredibly humble. He never really brags about his own abilities, and in fact this sometimes bites him in the butt because when he fights an opponent, he never uses more force than he needs to until he deems it necessary. For example, he claims himself that he could have beaten Kakazu had he used his Mangekyo Sharingan, but as we saw, he never activated that during the fight because he didn't think he needed to until the very last moments. His mission record shows that he's very willing to serve for the village, and he has no hesitation to do these missions, which may include some very hard things. I've already mentioned that he had to kill one of his best friends at his own hands, And he's also shown on more than one occasion that he would be willing to lay down his own life in defense of his village. And on top of all of this, Kakashi is still willing to learn things too. He's always looking to improve himself, and we see him doing things like rock climbing exercises to keep his body in shape, and that he's always learning new jutsu that he can break out to be more impressive than the last time we saw him. Once again, I know that somebody's attitude isn't exactly the defining factor in how effective they are, but it certainly goes a long way in helping get somebody recognized and to propel them to push themselves to greater heights in the first place. But now we come to the overall greatest reason that Kakashi is the top Jonin in the Leaf Village, and I say this rather definitively because Kakashi is without a doubt the most well-rounded ninja in the entire Hidden Leaf Village. Of course, during the early stages of Part 1, you may argue that Hiruzen has him beat, but speaking for the other Jonin in the Leaf Village, Kakashi has some pretty incredible abilities. I'll start with his taijutsu ability, which is something that I think actually might get overlooked a lot when we talk about somebody like Kakashi who's really good at genjutsu and ninjutsu as well. When it comes to taijutsu, obviously there's someone like Might Guy who is a taijutsu specialist, but we see on many occasions that Kakashi is actually able to keep up with Guy to some extent. Of course, during times like the Konoha Crush arc, Guy tends to use his bare fists, where Kakashi uses kunai and other such weapons, but the two of them kill a roughly equal number of enemy ninja during this assault on the village. Later on, during things like the War Arc, we see that Kakashi is able to keep up with Guy even while he's got the gates open, and while yes, Kakashi is using ninjutsu, it's not like his movement speed is completely outpaced by Might Guy in the first place. Then we also get to examine examples like Asuma versus Hidan, wherein Asuma actually lost to Hidan. Well, sort of. I know that he was able to eventually take the first victory against Hidan, but he would have died outright without any sort of victory had Shikamaru and his other teammates not stepped in to save him. Meanwhile, Kakashi is able to fight both Hidan and Kakuzu's masks at the same time and not even allow Hidan to scratch him to get a drop of his blood in the first place. This obviously doesn't mean that he is the strongest hand-to-hand fighter in the entire village, but when you compare him favorably to people like Guy and Asuma, who are renowned for their close-range capabilities, it's clear that Kakashi can keep up in basically any fight that's not on the high end of Kage level. Moving on to the second pillar of the main Shinobi arsenal, Kakashi is also extraordinarily skilled with genjutsu. We see him use it for the first time in the series on Sakura during the Genin exams, and I know this doesn't really prove anything, except for the fact that he's got an aptitude to cast it, which is not something that every ninja has. What makes me claim that Kakashi is really good at genjutsu, though, is actually when Itachi and Kisame come to the village the first time to capture Naruto. In their encounter, Itachi is able to reverse a genjutsu put on him by Kurenai and trap her in his own after reversing it. Kurenai is a Jonin specifically because she is a genjutsu specialist. Later on in this same fight, Kakashi manages to step in, and he warns Kurenai and Asuma that Itachi is about to cast a genjutsu, and he looks Itachi dead in the eye with some level of certainty that he might be able to resist whatever Itachi's about to throw out. Of course, he still gets taken by the Tsukiyomi, which is one of the strongest genjutsu of all time, but the fact that Kakashi should know who Kurenai is and what makes her capable enough to be a Jonin means that he probably thought his own genjutsu resistance was stronger than hers, which is something that typically plays into a person's own aptitude for using genjutsu in the first place. If Kakashi thinks that his own genjutsu resistance is higher than Kurenai's, then it's also likely that he probably thinks he's roughly on par with her in terms of overall usage of genjutsu. I'll reiterate that Kurenai is a genjutsu specialist, and Kakashi seems to think that he would be able to keep up with her nonetheless. Then we move into the third and final pillar of a shinobi's arsenal, ninjutsu. Now, we don't see a whole lot of ninjutsu showings from the other Jonin in the Hidden Leaf Village. We do get to see people like Aoba using some basic fire style, Asuma using the burning ash, so on and so forth, but nothing really major. Compare this to what we see Kakashi do in the very first arc of the show against Zabuza, and it's clear that he's probably a cut above almost all the rest of the ninja in the village. He's able to use things like the giant vortex jutsu to basically empty an entire lake and knock down several trees, which is more impressive than what we see from most of the other Jonin in the Leaf Village. He later on in the series uses things like Earth Style to create mud walls, and he's obviously got his most iconic jutsu at his disposal, the Lightning Blade. This is one of the most fearsome jutsu in the entire Hidden Leaf Village's arsenal, and Kakashi is the one who invented it in the first place. He has 4 of the 5 major chakra natures, everything except for wind, and so Kakashi is able to learn anything that the other Jonin might be able to throw out on their own. And if you think it's a stretch that he has the time to learn all of this, I'll also point out now that Kakashi has one thing going for him that makes him a clear cut above most of the rest of the ninja in the village. Kakashi has access to the Sharingan, which allows him to outright copy a jutsu after seeing it only a single time. This means that, just like Hiruzen, Kakashi has an extraordinarily vast arsenal of techniques that he can draw from in the middle of a combat encounter, or any other times he might need to cast a jutsu for versatility's sake. The only things we can't confirm that Kakashi can do are the hidden techniques of the various clans, things like Shadow Possession or the Yamanaka clan's mind transfer techniques. And while these are powerful tools, it's obviously not a complete deal breaker if Kakashi can't use them. We do know, though, that Kakashi has some pretty incredible abilities outside of just taijutsu, ninjutsu, and genjutsu. Namely, he's got a very strong sense of smell, able to compete with people like the Inuzuka clan's famous noses and their canine training abilities. He's one of the only people in the entire remainder of the Hidden Leaf Village that still has access to the Sharingan, which is the keepsake of one of the village's strongest clans in its entire history. He's got the raw intelligence to compete in a battle of wits with someone like Shikaku or Shikamaru, and while it's not definitive that he would be outright smarter than either of these two, the fact that he's worth mentioning in a conversation with 2 intellectual giants like this means that Kakashi is clearly no mental slouch. In fact, it's shown repeatedly that he's got a great knack for strategy over the course of the series, and in many cases, it's even better than Shikamaru's own ability to formulate a plan in the middle of a battle. He may not be planning 200 moves ahead into the future like Shikamaru does, but he is frequently and consistently able to accurately break down, examine, and synthesize solutions to the enemy's arsenal of what they're throwing out and come up with a successful and effective counter strategy. Once again, barring basically any of the hidden jutsu that belong to the specific clans of the village, if you name an aspect that makes a shinobi good, Kakashi has it. He is intelligent, he's good at the various espionage skills that a shinobi needs to have in their arsenal, he's willing to serve the village even at detriment to himself, which we see in times like when he's offered the position of Hokage. He clearly doesn't want it, but he's willing to take on the mantle for the betterment of the village. And really, the list just goes on and on and on. So from here on out, I'm going to take just a minute and list off several of the village's other Jonin and explain various ways in which Kakashi is able to compete with them in terms of being an overall better shinobi. I've already mentioned Might Guy in this video, and Guy himself is claimed to be Kakashi's rival. While I don't think anybody's going to argue that Guy would probably beat Kakashi in a fight if he opens like the 8th gate or anything for the most of the series, Kakashi is pretty clearly demonstrated to be a more reliable shinobi overall. In fact, there's the one filler flashback where Kakashi is in the Anbu and Guy tags along for a mission, and Guy himself thinks that he just can't do the kinds of things that the Anbu would require him to do. On top of this, even though their combat abilities are basically identical, well, not in terms of what they can do, but how much they can accomplish, it's clear that Kakashi is a better choice for a superior ninja when he's offered the seat of Hokage and Guy isn't. Yamato is the next person we can draw the comparison to, and if it's not obvious, there's also a filler in which Kakashi goes on a mission to capture Yamato and beats him in a fight. Yamato also always looks up to Kakashi anytime they're on panel together, and in fact, he treats Kakashi as an outright superior to himself. Kakashi seems to have mentored him at some point, which is actually a consistent theme we'll see with many of the characters that you might examine when talking about the other Jonin versus Kakashi. I've already gone over both Kurenai and Asuma, but just to recap, Kakashi seems to be better than each of them in their own respective specialty fields. Then you can start comparing him to some of the relatively featless ninja, people like Aoba, people like Anko, Genma, Raido, Fu, Torine. All of these guys don't really accomplish much, but anytime any of them come into contact with Kakashi, they treat him with an air of respect, and you get the idea that there's nothing they could do that Kakashi couldn't compete with in terms of being mission effective at the very least. In fact, I'll bring up Genma and Raido specifically because these two are people who were chosen to be the third Hokage's bodyguards, and during the Chunin exams, when Hiruzen gets taken hostage by Orochimaru, Kakashi looks disdainfully at the barrier and wishes he could be there to help Hiruzen out. I don't think many people would argue that if Kakashi were present in the Orochimaru versus Hiruzen fight that it might have gone differently, but I've never heard somebody argue that either Genma or Raido's presence inside the barrier would have changed the outcome of that fight. Of course, this probably has to do with the fact that they're once again essentially featless and therefore nobody really talks about them, but I'd like you to ask yourself honestly who would have made a bigger impact in there. Genma with his little toothpick, or Kakashi with his lightning blade. In the end, this really all comes down to a pretty simple issue. Kakashi is a very well-rounded ninja. Ask yourself if there's something a ninja needs to be good at, and then ask yourself if Kakashi seems like he's capable of pulling it off. The answer is probably yes, and because of this, Kakashi is the top Jonin in the Hidden Leaf Village. This doesn't always mean that he would be the best answer to any problem that the Leaf Village has, but if you were to get a mission and have to pick one person at random to have to solve it, and you landed on Kakashi, you would be in good hands. And that's going to pretty much be it from me today. I wanted to make this video as a short way of praising Kakashi and getting into the spirit of talking about him because I'm planning to make a few more videos of him in the very near future. I hope you guys are all excited for that because I certainly am, and I will hope to see you all in the next video. Until then, I hope you all stay safe, have a great rest of your day, and goodbye.